Hello and welcome to the Boomer Benefits channel. Today, we are getting ready to do another three-part series with one of my favorite people in the retirement industry, and that is Roger Whitney. He is with us today. Roger is the host of the Retirement Answer Man podcast and founder of the Rock Retirement Club, and we're going to learn all about what that involves here in our series. Roger, welcome to the show.
Hello. I'm excited. We're right down the street, but we're doing it via the internet. I guess that's how the world works nowadays.
Absolutely. I think I've done more virtual meetings since the end of 2020 than in all my career before that. And it's nice to see people in person, though, every now and then. I'm looking forward to seeing you in October at your rodeo roundup this fall. So maybe we'll get to do a little face-to-face later this year.
Definitely. Definitely.
All right, folks. Well, I brought Roger on to our channel today to cover some retirement questions. And as you know, here we talk about Medicare and Social Security. And I've noticed in the past that some of our videos that are the most popular have to do with what you're going to be spending in retirement. And these are things that fall outside of Medicare altogether. So I'm happy that people like the Medicare content, but I can see that we have an audience that's very interested in things surrounding retirement that are non-Medicare as well. So today, in this first part of our series, we're going to talk about how much you will spend in retirement. And so I'm going to serve up the perfect question to you on this, Roger, which is people plan to live on less in retirement, right? So we always putting away money in our investments and we are assuming we're going to have a lower tax rate someday. And so we're putting that away. But I wonder, they may think that they're going to have less spending in retirement. And what do you find is the actuality on that? Does their spending and lifestyle really scale back all that much?
Well, you have these rules of thumb, right? I forget what the old rule of thumb is. 80% of what you need. And the honest answer, and it's always the worst answer, but it depends, right?
Yeah.
It depends on a lot of things. But generally, I don't see people spending less than normal life, especially early in retirement.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with baby boomers, because if you think about being a baby boomer, we all grew up with the mentality of we're going to work and defer all this income and save. And then at retirement is when we're going to have this life of freedom, right?
Yeah.
And so what I have discovered in my years advising clients and also on the show is people get excited. It's like a kid on the way to Disney World. When they get to retirement, I think most retirees or baby boomers realize, hey, when I retire, I'm going to be probably as healthy as I'm ever going to be and as active as I'm ever going to be. And I have, perhaps grandkids that are at that, they still love you and want to be with you stage. And so you find people spend as much and sometimes more early in retirement because although they want to be a good steward and be fine later on in life, they don't want to miss this window of opportunity to create memories and experiences.
Yeah, because they're kind of at the youngest point that they're going to be in their retirement. And maybe, and for some, the healthiest point where we're still mobile and we can get around and we can travel and we can chase the grandkids around. For me, it would be grand dogs, but all the same, you get to do those things where you've got the physical abilities and you kind of get excited about those things. And I would imagine that that's a little bit of a surprise to people then to get through that first year of retirement and maybe you didn't spend quite as little as you thought you did or you thought you would.
Yeah, and also you're experiencing, especially with baby boomers, specifically, you're experiencing a lot of time freedom that you may never have had before, right? If you're in the corporate world, you don't have to travel anymore. You don't have to go to meetings. You literally have all this time freedom, which is really what people value, by the way. And so they want to go play.
Yeah.
And so factoring how you have to factor that into your spending estimates to map out a course that allows you to have all that fun, but still be sustainable over the long term, life-wise, right?
Yeah, exactly. So then, of course, how do you estimate what you'll spend in retirement and what are the monthly expenses that people need to plan for that they maybe don't always think about?
And you actually have a lot of data already, right? So you have your base needs. So, I think in terms of needs, wants, and wishes. So if we think of needs, when I say needs, that is the baseline life that represents a good life that you never want to have at risk. So you're going to have the obvious things that you're already paying for. You have housing, utilities, groceries, healthcare before Medicare or Medicare. You're also going to have maintenance. You're going to have cars that you have to buy every now and then. You're going to have, your just very light travel, the weekend getaway that is just part of a normal life and eating out. And you probably have a lot of this data already. And so as you approach retirement, it's important to really start to understand what those numbers are. Because what ends up happening, what I found, Danielle, is when you're in it's easy in your 50s, especially when you're probably earning more money than you've ever earned, and the kids are out of the house if you had kids. And it's easy to get into what I call the not so thrifty 50s, which is you don't have to worry about budgeting and, watching every penny because you have enough excess cash flow.
Yeah.
Which is fine. That's fine. I'm roughly in that stage and it's nice. But when you get closer to retirement, that's the time, if you're a budgeter, to get back and really know your numbers. And if you're not a budgeter, you don't have to become one, but you do want to start to understand, at least at a high level, hey, I need $7,000 a month or 10 grand a month or $3,000 a month, because that's going to represent the, some people will call that the minimum dignity floor that you never want to put at risk. And then on top of that, you would layer what's the flavor of life on top of that? And that's going to be like the sauce on a spaghetti. And then that could be the extra travel, the go-go years, the toys that you want to get. And then the spice of the dish, which is, those aspirational things. Oh, wow. If I could have that Harley Davidson, imagine. So you want to think of them in those three layers. And that's going to give you a lot more clue of, how much that core spending is going to be.
Yeah. And I think maybe people don't always realize that you're going to have all this time and you've got that time to fill. Because I often, when I have clients come back around their second or third year of retirement, and they're coming back to us for help with their drug plan changes and things like that, they will sometimes say, I had a lot of time on my hands and spending a little more money than I thought I would, but I'm having such a good time. So do you find that, like, for example, travel, do people tend to under budget for that just because they're going to come out of retirement and they've got this whole year facing them, and maybe they're going to do the RV thing, or they've got plans to, go to Yellowstone or some national parks they haven't seen, all the things that are on the bucket list? Do they sometimes overspend on travel in that first year or two?
Well, not in the last year or two. Everybody's over budgeted for travel.
One good thing about COVID. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I know from many conversations, there's a big itch that is waiting to be scratched.
Yeah.
Of plans that were deferred, and God willing, that will be able to be scratched here soon. I think that's a good question. Because when you're navigating transitioning, because and when it comes to travel and RVs and things like that, the hard part is you're always making the decision based on who you are now. So you're estimating things while you're still what I call institutionalized, right? You think of Shawshank Redemption, you're inside the institution of corporate world or your business or whatever else. And you're making estimates, in this case, spending estimates on what it's like on the other side of the wall.
Yeah.
You don't have enough perspective. So I think it's healthy to have a lot of liquidity when you're going through that transition, because really what I find, Danielle, is it's very common that a year or two after retirement, what they want is very different than what they expected, whether it's travel or where they want to live and the things they want to do, because they've started to discover they're on the outside and they want to figure out they're figuring out who this new version is. So we want to make sure there's some buffer in there.
Yeah, of course. And I see this a lot too, where they go and start an encore hobby or career or something new that they picked up, maybe something they always thought about doing, and all sorts of neat hobbies out there. They can glass blowing. And we have some people that have shared with us some of the cool things they do to work a little bit in retirement. And it's not even a lot of income, but these are things that they're pursuing And some of those involve things like classes and training for those things. And all of that stuff is expensive. If you always wanted to be a private pilot, there's a cost for that, to pursue that hobby and go with it. And those are all things that we need to plan for. And so, do you sometimes find people a little hesitant in that first year or two to spend that money right when we're walking into the beginning, we've got that big nest egg and we're thinking of how it's going to go the distance? Is there some hesitancy there to start dipping in? I see my own mom doing this. She never wants to touch the principal, and I'm telling her, you put this money away for a reason, go enjoy it, have a great retirement. But I find her reluctant sometimes to actually do that.
Definitely. And I think it's giving yourself permission to live and use your capital is really hard if you don't have a framework to understand that it's okay. Because when we think about retirement spending, Danielle, I think the problem is, the way I visualize it is, and we're all old enough to remember these, is like a seesaw or a teeter-totter, right? And on one end, you want to have an amazing life today and go buy that Harley or drive in the RV. But on the other end is, well, I don't want to be a burden to my kids or be broke when I'm 85. Right. And they're diametrically opposed. They feel like they are. And when you're retiring and making these decisions, you're standing on the middle of that teeter-totter trying to balance those two things. Right.
Yeah.
And usually the people that, in my experience, that have the most capacity to be able to enjoy life early on, part of the reason they have that capacity is because they're such great savers and delayers of gratification that they have the assets. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, psychologically, those things are hardwired. They don't just go away when you retire. And then when you retire, what happens? Think of what happens to you. One, you stop saving. And that's scary. Yeah. We've saved all our life. I update my net worth statement. I love to see it move, right? It's gratifying. And two, this is a big one. You lose your superpower, because earning an income is a superpower. Danielle, I don't know, what was the first dollar you earned? Do you remember?
I absolutely know the first dollar. My dad had a little earthworm business that we collected earthworms to sell to the fishermen, and the cute 4-year-old girl would earn 50 cents a carton. And that's how he taught me about earning a dollar.
And you had that dollar. And then for the first time in your life, you didn't have to ask anybody for money. If you wanted to buy, for me, it would have been the pack of baseball cards or whatever it was for you. I didn't have to ask anybody. So it gave you agency. And then over decades, you've built this superpower through your career and other things. Well, when you retire, I don't even know if we acknowledge this. We lose our superpower. We are no longer saving. We have what we have, and we feel very vulnerable. And not only that, so we lose our superpower. That's scary. Plus, we're not saving. Well, that's really scary. Plus, we have this long time frame. That's really, really scary. Of course, we're not going to feel comfortable spending early on. So I think the solution to that is to have a process to help give yourself permission to see that it will be okay. Mm-hmm. So, you in the process, and this is what we talk about on the show, and obviously in our practice, is you want to have a plan that is feasible long-term, and it's resilient because you've mapped out the cash flows and funded them. And then you've optimized them from a tax perspective. And what I find my role ends up being a lot is helping people give themselves permission to do things that they would really like to do. But you can't do that without that framework, because then you're just guessing.
Yeah. And so that leads us kind of right into the perfect segue where we can get into what we're going to cover in the next part of our series, which is, how do you build an income strategy for your spending in retirement so that when you get there, you've done all the thinking kind of ahead of time, and maybe you're a little more predisposed to accept and feel okay about the spending that you are going to do when you're diving into that principal and you're not necessarily watching the number grow the same way that you have in the past.
That's how you rock retirement.
Oh, I'm so excited to hear the next piece. Well, Roger, thank you for being here today. And folks, we'll be back in our next YouTube video that released with Roger, who is going to walk us through how to build an income strategy for your spending in retirement. Thanks, Roger. I'll see you on the next one.